You guys didn't really think my Miata was the only vehicle to get coilovers this year, did you? What's up, everybody? I'm Randy. Of course, this is the 5 Garage channel, and in today's video, we'll be talking about coilovers, and I'll be installing a set of coilovers from RaceWorks Suspensions on my Mazdaspeed 3. So if you are new to the channel, first of all, I'd like to say welcome, and to get you up to speed, I will post a link somewhere around in here to the playlist that has all of my previous Mazdaspeed 3 mods. And if you have been following the channel, and you should be following the channel, you know for a while that I have been contemplating and going back and forth on getting a set of coilovers for my Mazdaspeed 3. Now, originally, the conflict I was having was between getting a set of lowering springs or finally breaking down and getting a set of coilovers. And I believe it's a couple videos back where I asked for recommendations for coilovers from all the viewers out there, and I want to say I am very grateful for all the responses that I got. It really helped me in my research process. Part of that research process was I installed a set of coilovers from Megan Racing on my Miata, and that was a test to see if I liked the quality of those coilovers before I put them on my Mazdaspeed 3. After the Miata video got released, I was contacted shortly after by a company called RaceWorks, and they make custom hand-built coilovers for various car platforms, and luckily they make a set for the Mazda 3. And after a little bit of conversation, I was able to procure a set. And since I got the set and I got a hookup, I made sure to get you guys a hookup too. So if you use the link that is down here at the bottom of the screen, I'll also put it into the description. You guys can get a discount on a set of your own coilovers from RaceWorks. Now, RaceWorks offers two types of coilovers currently. There is the 172s, which is more of a street and sport coilover package. That's more for you guys who like to do autocrossing and it's still your daily driver. And there is also the Enduro, which is more focused towards guys who are doing track days and race cars. I went with the 172s because at the time that I ordered mine, the Enduros were not available. So sometime in the future, hopefully I can get my hands on a set of those, and I'll do a review videos for those as well. After I had my little conversation with RaceWorks, I decided to do a little research before I pulled the trigger on ordering a set of coilovers. Now, one of the things that I found out is these coilovers are hand-built and hand-assembled. They are not pre-made. So, when you decide to order a set, you can change the spring rates, for example. If you want to run a set of stock spring rates, you can. If you would like to run a slightly stiffer set of springs, you can. If you want to run some crazy stiff spring combo, you can. Or if you want to order a set of coilovers with a set of H&R springs, those are also available. Now, once you have your spring rate set, they then build the shock valving to match the spring rate of your springs, which really helps with the ride quality. I know for me, it offered up a bit of peace of mind because one of the things you're worried about when you're trying to put together a spring and a shock set is if the valving in the shock is going to be compatible with the spring rate. And no, some companies like Bilstein, you can order a set of shocks, you can get a spring, you can send both of them off, pay a fee, they'll revalve the shock, and then you get it back, and then everything works together. But in this case with RaceWorks, all of that is done in-house for no extra charge. You tell them what kind of springs you want to run, and they will custom valve the shocks to match that spring. I found it was pretty awesome that I could order a custom set of coilovers, but there's a little caveat in there, and that is, since none of these units are pre-assembled, there is a little turnaround time from the time you order them to the time that you receive them. And for me, it was about 2 weeks. And from the rep I talked to at RaceWorks, that's about the standard time. So If you're ordering these and you need them right away, it's probably not going to work out for you, but I feel like being able to order a custom valve set of coilovers and getting them in 2 weeks time, it was definitely worth the wait. As I was doing research into the customization options of the RaceWorks coilovers, I found some information that describes how the inner workings of the RaceWorks shocks differ from those of their competitors. Now, RaceWorks uses stainless steel shims and a CNC aluminum piston in their shock. And in their testing, they found that the stainless steel shims are more resistant to heat and are less likely to warp, unlike some of the shims that are used in other shocks. As well, the aluminum piston tends to generate less heat, and RaceWorks is all about controlling the heat that gets generated in the shock. And we all know what happens to oil once it gets heated. Once oil gets heated, it tends to thin out. It doesn't have the same properties that it has at cooler temperatures, and RaceWorks is all about making sure that your shocks perform optimally, so they have gone to great lengths to try to dissipate as much heat as possible. I also learned that they use actual shock oil in their shocks instead of hydraulic fluid, and these shocks are completely and fully rebuildable. I learned that you can take these shocks apart, rebuild them yourself, and then you can take them to any place that uses nitrogen for car tires, and you can recharge the gas in your shocks. So as I was doing all my research and I was starting to learn all this stuff, I became more and more impressed with the RaceWorks kit, especially that considering down the line, if I want to make some changes to my car, like I want to change the springs, I can actually get a kit, revalve them myself, rebuild them myself, and put them back on the car. So in my book, that was a big thumbs up, you know, compared to some of the other coilovers that are on the market. Yeah, the RaceWorks stuff is a little more pricey, but for that jump in price, you are getting the benefit of being able to rebuild and tune these shocks whenever you feel like it. As well, the RaceWorks coilovers come with a 3-year warranty, which gives me a good peace of mind because I found out that warranty covers everything from the tip of the coilover to the end. If you need anything replaced, contact RaceWorks and they'll get you sorted out. I know, y'all are sitting there, you're getting tired of me talking, and they want to know, Randy, what am I getting for my money? I got you covered. This is the front coilover for the Mazdaspeed 3, and the first thing I noticed when I took this out of the box is the threaded collar on the shock body is nickel plated. And what that is going to do is that is going to help this to resist rust. Now, I don't know if any of you out there watching this video have experience with coilovers, but on other coilovers I've had in the past, this shock body has a coating on it, and after you've used it for a while, the coating comes off, and the steel that is underneath gets exposed to the dust and the grime and the salt of, during driving, and it begins to rust. And what happens is when it's rust, these aluminum collars become very hard to move. They almost become fused in place. So one of the things I am looking forward to is to see how this nickel plating holds up. And if it does hold up, I will be greatly satisfied because that means I will be able to adjust this with some ease. Now, this front coilover is adjustable for ride height, which is down here. You can adjust your spring preload here. As well, these are rebound adjustable, and the adjuster is here, and it comes with 24 points of adjustment. Also, this has an adjustable camber plate. On the models that use a McPherson strut in the front, you get the adjustable camber plate. On the models that don't, you get a pillow ball mount. And this comes with a little adjuster nut that you can put on here. Currently, right now, I don't have mine on, but when I put them on the car, I will install them and I will show you guys how I do that. This is the rear shock, and we have our rear ride height adjustment. We have our nickel plated threaded shock collar body. All of the shocks come with new bump stops. As well, this large nut right here is how you adjust your rebound. And the front and the rear coilovers all come with new bolt hardware for installation. As well, you get a spring perch that you can adjust your preload and a new set of springs. So basically in the kit, everything comes pre-assembled, so all you have to do is remove the old stuff and replace it with the new. I feel like I've done enough talking about RaceWorks and the 172 coilover suspension, but you are all here to see that install. So I'm gonna switch out of this RaceWorks swag, put on my work clothes, and I'll see you all out in the garage. So here we are at the car. I went ahead and have the car up on jack stands, and I've removed the wheels on the front. And normally I would show that stuff, but since this is going to be a long process, I just went ahead and skipped it for this time. But the first thing we want to do is this wire right here goes to the ABS sensor that's at the back of the wheel hub, and you want to go ahead and disconnect that first. And it's just a simple clip that you got to push in, and there you go. So when you remove this, there's a clip right here. You press in on that and just pull up and set that to the side right now. So the next step after disconnecting the ABS line is we are going to remove this end link, and that's going to require the use of an Allen wrench to hold it and a 14mm boxing wrench to loosen the nut. I got that loose. We're just going to pretend like I just didn't spend an hour trying to get this end link loose and having to run and pick up some new Allen head wrenches. But if you're wondering, this is a number 5 Allen head wrench, and that goes in there. And now we can push that end link back and get it out of the way. You can also take the line for the ABS and slide it out of the way. Set the nut aside. And the next thing we need to do is pop this retaining clip loose for the brake line. And I'm going to move my light out of the way. Now that we have the brake line loose and it's removed from the bracket, there is a 15mm pinch bolt that is right here that we will have to loosen. And when you go to remove this, make sure that you support this lower control arm, because when we release that pinch bolt, sometimes this lower control arm will slide off of this strut, and you don't want that to fall. So I'm going to stick a jack underneath it to support it. And then once we get that pinch bolt loose and removed, we can then move to the top of the engine and see about removing the 3 12mm bolts, I believe they are, that hold the top of the strut in the engine bay. There are multiple ways that you can get the shock body loose of this lower cup. Now, Mazda recommends that you take a hammer and start beating it loose. I've also seen a tip where you take the pinch bolt, thread it in backwards, and put a washer in between the pinch point. And then that way, when you screw in the pinch bolt, it'll widen it enough where you can begin to work it loose. I'm going to try both of those, and I'm going to see which one works the best. So to give you guys an idea of what I've done, I'm taking the pinch bolt and I ran it in backwards, and I had a scrap piece of steel that I put back here, and there's a little slot back here that you can put that in, and it will block the bolt hole. And then you start running the bolt through, and what that does is the bolt pushes on the metal plate. It starts to spread open the pinch area, and as you can see, it's already started coming loose. Now I have the jack under here to support it, and now I'm going to go ahead and kind of work it loose drop the jack down a little and see if I can get it start coming out. So here we are on the top side of the engine. Now that we have that 17mm pinch bolt down below out, and we have the bottom of the stock shock free, we're going to move our way up here to the top, and we need to loosen these 3 14mm bolts. Now that we have these upper 3 bolts removed, it's time to go back down in the wheel well. Okay, now comes the fun part. You know, in that previous step when I took all 3 bolts out of the upper strut mount, well, you're going to want to leave one of those in. Get your jack ready. Make sure that you still have your pinch bolt and separator plate in there. And now what you're going to do is, I have the jack supporting the lower control arm, have it pushed up to the point where it's actually pushing against the chassis of the car. I have put one of the upper bolts back in. I'm going to lower the jack, which is going to lower the control arm, which should hopefully help the lower end of the shock get released from where it is. And then once I get that out, I can take the upper bolt back out and everything should come out. I hope, but we'll see how this goes. I'll let you guys know how I got it out once I get it out. Okay, as you can see, I got that out. Not gonna lie to you though, that was a little bit of work. What it required was, not only did I have to use that pinch bolt method, I also needed to grab something like a block of wood to put underneath the body of the shock, so that when I let the jack down, it released enough and gave me enough room to where I could wiggle the bottom free. After you do that much, it will pretty much come out. You do want to make sure you have your jack in position, because once you get that lower shock mount out of that bucket, that lower control arm will drop fast. So make sure you have that, and also make sure that you don't leave it dangling. You want something underneath it to support it so you don't damage your brake line. The first thing you will notice, now that I have the stock suspension out of the car and we can compare the two, the RaceWorks coilovers are thinner in diameter, and that's going to be a big plus to you guys who want to run a wider set of wheels with more offset. Because if you try to do that with the stock suspension, you will definitely rub. And as you can see, the spring on the RaceWorks is much smaller in diameter, and that's going to give you more room to be able to run those wider offsets. Another thing that I like to point out, now that I can see them side by side, is on the stock one, and the reason why I was having such an issue getting it out was this right here is the pinch bolt area. And what was happening was, as I was trying to wiggle it free, I still had a head of the pinch bolt going through this. So as I was trying to lift it up, it was catching on this bottom tang and it was making it hard to get out. Whereas we can see on the RaceWorks coilover, it's more of a hook. So you can just, it wouldn't have caught up and makes it easier to get out. So the next time I have to remove these, it should be much easier going. Now I'm going to start by installing the new coilover setup, and hopefully it should not be as much of an ordeal as it was for me to remove the stock stuff. Before we install this, there's two things you need to do first. First is set your spring preload, which I did, and you want it to be right at the point where it takes up the slack between the spring perch and on both ends, and I got that tight. And then I went ahead and set an arbitrary ride height The stock strut setup was about 21.5 inches in length. I've got this set to 20, so that should be an 1.5 inch difference. So hopefully we'll see how that settles out once the car has had a chance to be driven and the suspension settles after a week or two. So getting ready to do the install, and you want to make sure that your camber adjusters are facing out towards the sides of the car, which will make it easier to set the camber later. One more thing I would like to add while I have this down here, make sure you install these to the right side. As you can see, this one obviously goes on the passenger side because this is the M-link mount and it needs to be over here. Now you could just rotate this, but then the area that goes in the pinch bolt would be on this side. So to save yourself some embarrassment and some extra work, make sure you have the right coilover for the right side of the car. Oh, it's been such a day. Now that we have the coilover installed, the lower is in the cup in the lower control arm, and I've used a jack to raise it up into position. We can now go ahead and install the 3 12mm bolts and washers that go here, and you're going to want to torque those down to 39 foot-pounds. Okay, if you've seen my Miata coilover install video, you know that in order to torque down this lower pinch bolt, it has to be with the suspension under load. So, as you see, I have my jack that is supporting my lower control arm. I'm going to raise this up and get some tension on the suspension just to the point where I see it's getting ready to start lifting the car, and then I will go ahead and reinstall that pinch bolt. And you're going to want to torque that down to 50 foot-pounds. Okay, as you can see, I have the front coilover installed. Everything was pretty straightforward. I did run into one little small issue, and that is with the bracket for the ABS, which is right here. There is a tang on the lower end of the bracket that you are either going to have to bend or use a Dremel to cut it off. I just use a set of pliers and bent mine back. What it happens is it won't allow the ABS bracket to sit at the right orientation, and so you have too much tension on your ABS wire. So I just decided to go ahead, bend mine back. I was able to get it back into the stock OEM orientation, and now everything is fine. Other than that, I didn't have any real issues installing the coilover into the car. Other than some issues made by my own stupidity, the install of this was pretty straightforward. If you get to this point, you can go ahead, put your wheels back on, torque your lug nuts down the spec. But I need to go ahead and finish the other side, so we will pick this video back up when I get ready to start working on the rear. All right, so I got the fronts done. I already went ahead, put the car on the ground, put the wheels on the front. I made sure to double check all my bolts, make sure they were all torqued to spec. And then when I put my wheels back on, I made sure to torque those down to about 80 foot-pounds. So now here we are at the rear of the car, and the first step in the process back here is we need to remove the end links like we did at the front, but this time we are going to undo both sides at the same time and then roll the bar out of the way.
And no, I pre-loosened this. My end links were not that loose. Alright. And I reached a point where I gotta get an Allen put in here to hold this while I take this off. And this, by the way, is a 17mm bolt, unlike the ones in the front, which are 14.
Now that we have the end links disconnected and the rear sway bar has been rolled out of the way, next we come back into the wheel well compartment, and you need to remove those two 12mm bolts that hold the upper shock perch to the frame.
Once you get those two 12mm bolts off of the upper shock mount, you then need to remove this lower 17mm bolt, and then that will make it where the shock will now drop out of the car. And if you haven't already, I highly advise you to use PB Blaster on pretty much everything that you are taking apart. It just makes it that much easier for the disassembly. And if you have a pipe cleaner, I like to just go through, spray a little PB Blaster into the bolt holes, and then chase them with a pipe cleaner just to make it easier for when I got to put this stuff back together. You're going to need to put this upper shock mount onto your new shock, so we'll do that here in a second.
Now, with the rear shock removed, we can now move on to removing the rear spring. And what you're going to want to do is have your jack ready and have it under the rear control arm. And you're going to remove this 17mm bolt. With the jack supporting it, once you remove that bolt, you're going to slowly release the jack so that the arm will drop and you can just reach up and pull the spring out. Just be very careful with this step. That spring is still under a little bit of load, so let the jack out slowly so it just doesn't come springing out at you. And now the stock spring is out. Make sure to save that rubber isolator on the top. We will need that for our new spring install.
So as you can see, I got the spring out, and this is where the RaceWorks suspension is going to differ a little different from some of the others that are on the market. Usually you have a lower spring perch that fits in this lower control arm, and that is what the height adjusters for the spring are located. But the RaceWorks unit is actually going to be bolted into the upper spring pocket, so you're going to need a 17mm to get this nut out. And then once that bolt comes out, you then will mount your upper spring perch and then bolt that back in, and you're going to want to torque that down to about 65 foot-pounds. I like that. I like that setup much better. Now you can see I've got my perch installed. I've got my ride height set for right now. And if you guys were wondering how I was setting my ride height, I'm going to try to keep it as close to stock as possible while I wait for all of this new stuff to settle in. And then after that happens, probably be about a week or two, then I will show you guys how to change your ride height in a later video. Now, isolator in the top, put that all together, and then all I will need to do is put the jack back under this lower control arm and then lift it and try to line it up and get it back in place so I can bolt this back together. And when this does go back together, I'm gonna set it
I'm going to torque it to 60 foot-pounds.
Okay, so in that last shot, I actually had my spring in upside down. So I went ahead, flipped the spring around, and then I make sure I got it going the right way. And now I'm going to use the jack to raise the lower control arm into place. It takes a little bit of trial and error to get it all to line up. Just be patient with it. I got this just about tight. It's not torqued down yet because I still need to install the rear shock. And then once I have everything on here together, I will put the suspension under load, torque it down, and then we'll be done with this side. All right, so here is the new shock, and I took the old one apart off camera. It's not that hard. There's a 13mm bolt here that you have to loosen, and sometimes you can hold onto the shock body and it'll keep the shaft from spinning, but if it does, you can just take some vice grips or something, just grab it right there, and then get the bolt off. And then you take the upper mount off. You don't need to use the stock bump stop because the new shock has one. And put this back together. It's 20 foot-pounds. And then we're going to take this, bolt it into the car. But first thing we're going to do to reinstall this is start by mounting it back and putting in those 12mm bolts, and those get torqued down to 20 foot-pounds. Okay, so I installed the bottom shock bolt first, and then I used the jack to raise the shock. And actually, I just raised a whole lower control arm up, and I got my upper shock bolt started. And as you can see, I would definitely recommend doing it that way rather than in the reverse. It was just much easier. So once I get these in, I'm going to torque these down to 20, and then I need to torque the two bottom bolts to 60, and then the install on this side will be done. And now the upper bolts are torqued, and I will then torque the bottom two bolts, like I said, to about 50 foot-pounds. And then you can put the wheel back on, torque the lug nuts, and the install on this side is done. Everything is bolted in, everything's torqued down. Looks really good. I'm really impressed. At this point, you can go ahead and reinstall your in-links and get everything else bolted down. For your in-link bolts, you're going to want to torque those down to around 35 to 40 foot-pounds. And then you can put your wheel back on, put on your lug nuts, jack the car up, take the jack stands out, put it back on the ground, and you're done. All right. So before you start going zooming around the neighborhood with your new suspension, make sure to double check your work. Make sure all your bolts are torqued down. Make sure any electrical connections are plugged back in, like the ABS sensor on the front. Make sure that that's plugged in before you start driving it around. And then take it easy. It's going to take a couple days of driving for the suspension to settle. And that is the reason why I didn't immediately just jump straight to the ride height I wanted, or do any camber settings, anything of that nature. I'm going to let the car have a chance to settle a little bit, and then I am going to make a video showing you guys how I set the ride height, and then I'll go get an alignment and we'll go from there. I want to extend a big thanks to RaceWorks for giving me the opportunity to review these 172s coilovers from my Mazdaspeed 3. I am really happy that I got some coilovers for my car, because it was one of those things that I have been debating back and forth about doing, and it was a perfect opportunity, as well as I got some coilovers. Make sure you guys go out and follow 172 Suspension on Instagram. Follow them on Twitter. Give them a big thanks for giving me this opportunity so I can do this video for you all. since RaceWorks gave me the hookup, I'm gonna give you all the hookup. And if you are interested in getting a set of these coilovers for your own car, right here will be a link to the 172 suspension site, and the link 172suspension.com/discount/55garage will get you your own discount hookup on a set of these coilovers for any of the cars that are on the 172 site. When I win, you guys win. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it. I had a lot of frustration making it, but I got coilovers, so make sure to click that like button. Don't forget to smash subscribe as well. I got a whole lot of videos coming in the future. I got a ride height video that I need to do on this car. I got a review video that I need to do on the Miata, and there might be a front mounted intercooler package coming. So you're definitely not going to want to miss that. As of right now, it is Monday evening. I have the other side of the car to finish, but since I've done this side, the other side should go relatively quickly. But I'm gonna get to it, and I will see you all on the next one.